Shalom, brothers and sisters. The UN again. The UN rights chief calls for a halt to illogical escalation in Israel-Palestine. Volker Turk, and he's pushing only the Palestinian numbers. He urged Friday for all illogical escalations in Palestine and Israel that is claiming human lives to stop, rather than doubling down on failed approaches of violence and coercion that have failed in the past. I urge everyone involved to step out of the illogic of escalation that only ends in dead bodies. Last year saw record numbers of Palestinians killed in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the highest numbers of fatalities of Israeli inside Israel and the occupied West Bank in many years. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Meirav Eilon-Shahar, criticized Turk for being one-sided and not condemning a deadly terrorist attack against Jewish worshippers. Shahar said the press release does not even have the decency to describe the attacks last week for what they were, acts of Palestinian terrorism targeting Jewish people. Its prejudice towards Israel means it chooses to turn a blind eye to daily incitement of children by the Palestinian Authority and their support for terrorism. This must end now, she said. Turk went on in his statement to say that the UN Human Rights Office documented 151 killings of Palestinians by Israeli security forces in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Concerns over excessive force. Turk said there are severe concerns about excessive use of force and arbitrary killings. In 2022, 32 Palestinians killed in the West Bank. In 2022 as well, 24 Israelis were killed inside Israel. But we're not stressed about the Israelis at all. That's fine. Israeli authorities on 29 January announced measures to seal off immediately family homes of those suspected of perpetrating attacks, and more than 40 people, including family members, were arrested concerning the attacks. He said collective punishment measures, including punitive forced evictions and house demolitions, are prohibited under international humanitarian law and incompatible with international human rights provisions. But killing Jews while they're worshipping, that's cool. International law doesn't have an issue with that. Take them out. That's the opinion they seem to be leveraging here. Plans by the government of Israel to expedite and expand the licensing of firearms with the stated intention of adding thousands of Israeli civilians carrying firearms can only lead to further violence and bloodshed. The human rights chief said his office knows from experience that the proliferation of firearms will increase the risks of killings and injuries of Israelis and Palestinians. Now, the interesting thing here is, if you go into history, every time a country makes sure you have less firearms, whether you're for or against it, take Germany for example, the minute you start removing the firearms, then they can take complete control and do exactly as they please, because you can't defend yourself. Just go through some history books and you'll see it everywhere. So he's full of rubbish with these statements. During the past week, there have already been several reports of violence between Israeli settlers and Palestinians, particularly in the occupied West Bank. Now, the interesting thing here as well that I want to point out, he refers to the Palestinians as Palestinians in Palestine. He refers to the Israelis as settlers. So they've been in that country since May 14, 1948. Their country, democracy, their own, Israel. But they're settlers. Do you see how skewed this body is? The United Nations might as well just rename themselves now the Beast Nations and be ready and reveal their guy as soon as we leave very, very shortly, because it's ridiculously in your face. God bless. We'll keep watching and looking. Shalom.